Hey up, I'm Guy Kestivan, the Tester Man, and this is the Wheeltop GeX wireless gravel group set. A fully wireless, multi-gear configurable from a drivetrain manufacturer who's been making components since 1951. So, we're going to have a quick look at the basics on the workbench. Then I'm going to fit it to a test bike and we're going to compare it directly head to head with SRAM Apex Axis. Its closest affordable opposition, but still a lot more expensive than this Wheeltop setup. So first thing to say, full mark for packaging from Wheeltop. You got a nice outer sleeve with your smart code. So you can direct link to the app that goes with the equipment. A little bit of foam packing in there. And these are the brakes. So flat mount, front and rear. The rear hose already installed. Oh yeah, it's stuck to its packaging a bit there. So rear hose already installed. It's keen to stay in its box, sorry about that. And as you can see, Shimano Ice Tech style, finned rotors on there, flat top mount. Nice little contrasting anodised bore cap on there. Makes it look a bit smarter. And then in here, you've got the various bits of hardware, mounting bolts, and you've got adapters as well. For different rotor sizes. So everything you need there pretty much to get rolling with your installation, because what's interesting is they actually put the I don't think I've mixed this up. I've had them out already, so apologies if the bleed kit does come in this box and I've mixed it up, because I've now put it in this box. But I don't think that's going to radically change your opinion of the group set, so we'll let it go for now. Apologies to Wheeltop if I've got that mixed up, but yeah, and it's Android and Apple app. We'll look at that once we get the install going, and then again, congratulations, you now have the EDS GeX, a smart wireless electronic transmission from the future. And like I say, yeah, here you go, there's the bleed kit. I don't know if that's where it originally came in, but that's where it's ended up anyway. And like I say, Wheeltop, you know, although they've only really come to prominence really in terms of their own branding, with these new wireless group sets. There's a mountain bike group set, there's a road group set, but they've sent me the gravel group set, which is very kind of them. So thanks to Six, who's reached out from their PR company. And here we go. So as you can see, rear mech is unashamedly fairly SRAM styled, certainly with the lettering there. Obviously looks a lot like SRAM GeX, although there is that extra E in there. It's not UDH, it's standard rear mech mount, and unlike SRAM Axis, the battery is actually built in and charges through that little port on the back there. Wireless connection, it's fully waterproof setup, but alloy cage on, and you can see narrow wide chain management on the jockey wheels there, and like I say, fairly chunky with that built-in battery, weighs 418 grams for that rear mech, so that's heavier than Apex Axis, which is 348, and Rival Axis, which is 330. However, the shifters actually come in lighter than the SRAM Axis stuff, so 241 grams per shifter, whereas Apex is 280 grams per shifter and Rival is 244 grams per shifter. Not quite as long and low, it's a bit more of a Shimano kind of feel to how it sits in the hand. Obviously I'll have a better idea once I get it onto the bike, but you see outward kink on the levers there. Forged lever, similar to Apex. And then you can see you've got just the one function button on the left hand side, and then up and down on the right hand side. And you can see there's a little indicator light on there which helps you with the pairing process. But actually the nice thing about this kit is while it doesn't work as soon as you open the box, all you do is you just unscrew that half turn, pop the battery out, and then when you pop the battery in, the whole setup is actually pre-synced. So everything's ready to go, and then you open up the app, which we'll look at in a second, and then you can start programming how many different gears you want it to operate in. Because the party piece of this Wheeltop setup is that while it comes ready for 13 speed, you can actually configure it anywhere between 3 and 14 speed in the Wheeltop app. So it's future-proofed for beyond anything even SRAM and Campag are currently doing, or even anything I've heard about. But the really pertinent thing is that if you've got, say, a 10 or 11 speed setup now, you can use the same shifters and same rear mech to take it up to 12 speed or 13 speed. So it's not only a wireless upgrade, but it's also a gear number upgrade and fully future-proofed. So that's what looks like a very functional set of hardware. Now, time to fit it onto the bike, program it for the right number of gears, and then get onto the trails to test it. And the bike I'm going to be putting it onto is my trusty Kinesis G2 all-road gravel bike, and as you can see, this is currently running old school SRAM Apex, but the mechanical 11-speed version. So we'll keep the chain set on there, and I'll probably put a 12-speed block on the rear, but we'll get rid of all these cables and all this SRAMness and plug in the Wheeltop instead. Right, so we have it installed. Not going to say it was the simplest setup I've ever done. First off, I mean, to be fair, there were a lot of elements that were really, really easy. The system comes pre-paired. So you just undo that, which is where the battery is. Half turn it. You can do it with a coin. Half turn it. You just pop the battery out and then pop it back in. And then the whole system, these are your shifters here. And the whole system is pre-synced. So mech and shifters work together fine. You know, the only sort of mechanical issue I had was putting the hose and the olive and everything into that ferrule there. Actually just a little bit awkward in terms of angle, in terms of getting it engaged. It was actually quite hard to get the hose fully into the lever body and then have enough space on the threaded section there to actually get it installed. But that's all in nice and tight now. And although you do get a bleed kit with the brakes ready to do, you know, re-bleed them if you need to, actually it was easy enough to do that I've got a really good solid connection front and rear without even needing to re-bleed the system. So it's already pre-bled, that's what I'm trying to say. So the rear brake and hose are sealed, and then the lever's sealed as well. So when it's all come together, it's actually fine. And if you look, so that saved me a load of faff. So that saved you a lot of faff in terms of setup. And if you look at the brake down here, it's actually a really neat looking setup. The only thing I would say is that it's just a shame they've got, I mean, yeah, it's useful information, you know, that's your 160mm rotor bracket and that's the way it should be up. But, you know, the fact that you've got the lettering on the outside just doesn't look quite as neat as it could do, especially considering the actual caliper itself is quite a neat install there, and you've got your Shimano style finned pads on there, and you've got your contrast anodizing on the cylinder cap, and you know they've even bothered to sort of pretend milling marks in the forging, which I think is quite nice. And you know, it's a very neat looking caliper. The other thing is it's a fixed outlet angle as well, but you'll see that on nearly all basic brakes. And you know, lever looks, I've not ridden them yet, but you know, there's a bit of a lump there under there, but you know, the actual ergonomics are simple enough. And then, obviously, we've got to go and look at the shifting. And as I say, this can be set up in a whole range of different gears, which I think it's from 3 right through to 13, but it actually comes set up as standard in 13 speed. So how you change it is all done through this Wheeltop app. So, you know, there's your, let's just go to home. There's my mech, I've named it, I'll put it in racing mode, which means it's slightly faster, more responsive shift, but that means it drains the battery, but you've got a battery display there, and you've got the rear, left and right shifters on there as well, and they've got battery indicators on there. But then you go into settings on here, and this is how you set it up. So you have to, I mean, the thing I struggle with initially is just kind of the mistranslation almost. So replace cassette would be easier to understand if it said choose cassette and stuff like that. So you go in and you say cassette speed, and you got a whole range for 3 speed, as you can see, right through to 14 speed if you wanted. They're planning ahead there, a Wheeltop. So I've selected 11 speed there, and then what you do is you go into initial calibration. And it does all, you know, it comes up with a lot of warnings disguised as hints. So, and the trick is, what you have to do is make sure, there was quite a lot of jiggery pokery going on with this. Because you can see it's actually a little bit out of kilter here. So you've got to be careful to kind of sync everything. Right, come on, let's get you into first gear. Basically, there's quite, compared to something like SRAM, it's just not as intuitive. SRAM, you bolt it on and it's pretty much ready to go because it's set up for just one cassette size, you know, depending on, you know, if you're with Rival or most of the, in fact, anything but Red Explorer, you're dealing with 12 speed now. Whereas this obviously has to work across different speeds. So then you go in there and you do an initial calibration. So here it is in gear 1, and then you can move it up. There we go. So you can shift it through the app here, which is quite handy. But what I found is it got a little bit confused, sort of starting from about here. You can see it's just grinding a little bit, and so you have to go through fine-tuning gear. And this is where it got a bit tricky, because basically what you've got here is the kind of spacing. It's essentially the spacing and where your rear mech is moving to in relation to the gear. And so you have to go into each gear. And then, so if it's not changing from 8th to 9th, you need to move that number for 9th, like up a bit or down a bit, depending on whether it's going in or not going in. This is almost like a digital barrel adjuster. It's probably the easiest way to do it. Although what I did find was a lot of the settings I ended up using were actually outside of what Wheeltop say you should use, and therefore could potentially affect the warranty. But that was the only way to get it to shift neatly all the way through 11 speed. Because what was happening before, it's kind of taking 2 shifts to get from 8 to 9, and then it wasn't recognising that it started to go to 11 again. So I've got there, and it seems to be an okay shift in the work stand, and, you know, up and down the block. But there is quite a lot of faffing about with all these different numbers. Well, there was for me. There might not be for you. It might work straight away. But prepare, you know, put your calm pants on take a bit of time with a cup of tea and some biscuits. Don't expect to rush through this. It's not just bolt it on, get out the door like it is with SRAM. You know, I haven't done anything with the i2, so I can't really speak to that. But compared to SRAM, because you've got that versatility of different amount of shifting and different cassette sizes, it's nowhere near as simple to set up, in my experience. But, you know, you have got all this potential to literally fine-tune where the mech thinks it is in that spacing, and that's how you get an accurate shift on it. And, at the end of the day, we've got it there. And, yeah, so, but yeah, be prepared to kind of try and decipher some slightly confusing bits and get on and off YouTube onto these setup videos that Wheeltop provide to get yourself set up and ready to go. But ultimately, you know, we now have a fully functional 11-speed wireless group set. So it's time to get the bars taped up. Oh, maybe just a little bit more indexing. Time to get the bars, well, we'll see how it does out on the road. And then maybe we come back in, do a bit more fine tuning. And then be time for an initial overall review. Right, so I'm out on the Wheeltop GeX now. It's actually my third ride on the group. First ride was just a little shakedown ride, and I had a little bit of glitchiness around gears 6 through 8. They weren't quite indexing properly, so I got it back in the workshop, dialed in some new numbers, and now it's absolutely sweet all the way up and down the block. I mean, obviously a lot of that shifting speed and accuracy depends on the block and your chain you're using, and that's not part of the Wheeltop system. But in terms of you pushing the buttons and the mech moving, especially now I've got it set up the right way around, got it mimicking SRAM now, it came set up the other way around, it's been absolutely spot on. You know, certainly nothing to really call between it and the lower price SRAM wireless group sets. The only thing I have noticed is that as battery life goes down, it does start to get a bit hesitant between shifts. So once it's like a down about sub 10%, it starts occasionally just not responding as fast as you want. You sometimes have to give it a double push on the levers, but as long as you keep it reasonably charged, it's absolutely fine. And it's great, you know, that you have all that information at your fingertips through that app. Once you got used to that wording, which can be a bit dysfunctional at times, the actual mechanics of it, the Bluetooth setup and everything else like that, works fine. And the braking is perfectly decent as well. Certainly helps having these 160mm rotors, but it's not the most luxurious lever feel imaginable, but definitely on the firm side. But you know, they're responsive, there's a decent amount of feedback, the pads feel pretty hard, but plenty of power, and you know, a reasonable modulation as well. Definitely not up there with Red Axis or even GRX in terms of feel, and I still think Campag E-Car actually has the best braking feel of all. But you know, a proper cable group, certainly a lot more consistent and controlled in feel than your average cable setup, and with all the automatic pad wear adjustment advantages of hydraulic. And interestingly, while initially that lever hood felt a little bit cramped compared to SRAM, when I've measured it compared to rival, and force and apex, there's literally just a couple of millimetres difference in the actual dimension. So, I mean, it is still a bit of a squeeze with fat hands like mine, and it's going to suit smaller hands better, but it's not the initial issue I thought it might be. The only thing you might struggle with is if you have got small hands, while the lever body dimension will suit, there's no reach adjust on the actual blade. So it's quite a stretch out there, and you might struggle to get a comfortable braking position depending on the shape of your bars. And I like the fact you've got that kind of dual SRAM Shimano style lever architecture. So you have got that little sub lever alongside the main lever, like on Shimano, or you can have it left and right like SRAM in terms of your shifting. And it really does give you the best of both worlds, depending on what, you know, I guess mechanical system you'll be coming off. You've got both options, and you just will naturally gravitate to whichever one kind of suits you best. And the multi-shift works really well too. So if you're suddenly coming up to a steep climb, you just hold that trigger down, and it's just going to keep going all the way through until you're in the right low gear to crawl your way up it. The only thing I would say you need to keep an eye on is that battery usage, because it does seem to blow through the charge quicker than you might expect, certainly in the first couple of rides. Now, like I said, I was surprised it got down to like 5% in the time I've been riding it, but that might be just like a battery conditioning thing. So keep an eye on that longer term. And overall, first impressions are what it lacks in kind of app refinement and issue-free setup. It really wins in terms of that unmatched multi-gear versatility and just straight up value, because there's nothing close at the moment for what is a perfectly functional wireless group set that shifts as well as you can expect for whatever chain and cassette setup you're running, and also brakes perfectly adequately as well. The only potential issues are hand size on the hoods and how fast it goes through the batteries. But so far, I reckon this Wheeltop GeX is really top if you want to try it wireless at a cable price. And if you can cope with that kind of level of puns, make sure you subscribe, give this a like, tell your mates about the channel, and if you really want to help long term with the channel, then please consider subscribing on Patreon for just a few quid a month that make a big difference to the sustainability of what I do here on GeX TV. Just for watching, folks.